thank you for being there for Isobel Waller-Bridge's Masterclass. And thank you, Cathy Verney, who is a director, for accepting to moderate this session.
Bonjour. Alors, je vais essayer de le faire en anglais.
So I'm going to try and speak English because it's nicer and more intimate to do that. So I'm sorry about the level of my English, and if it's too much of a problem, I'll switch back to French, okay?
I'm grateful for that. You giving it in English, thank you.
I'm so glad to speak with you, really. We have a common point together, because you work with your sister for Fleabag, and I'm a screenplayer and a screenwriter and a director, and I work always with my husband.
Yes.
So it's a family business. And how do you feel with that? You think it's easy to work with
sisters? We were just saying sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not easy at all. But I think my sister and I, because we've worked on and off really together since we were really small. And we really do have a shared sense of humour and shared sort of sensitivity. So we know each other incredibly well, obviously. And because of that, there's a sort of a real sense of, we have an enormous amount of trust between us and a truthfulness. And that sort of translates into a sort of fearlessness about being really direct without there having to be, there are no's that we're not precious with each other. And that can, it's weird, it doesn't ever find, it never, we're never afraid of telling each other that we don't really necessarily agree with the other's choice. But I think I suppose, when we felt, for me, especially with something like Fleabag, which is really, it was, it's been sort of 10 years, really. I mean, she started writing that quite a long time ago, and it was a play first, and so it really lives in her. And so I really did feel a huge sense of responsibility writing the music for it. And so presenting the first ideas, I was very nervous, definitely, and really wanted to, for it to be the best, obviously, that it could be, but also to speak to a truth that I knew that the reason she'd asked me to do it is because I was sort of inside it somehow. And then it was very rewarding when the things that I did bring, they were right. And so that felt good.
So it's good to work with a sister. With a husband, it's not the same.
A little different.
Because in a couple, it's more competitive.
Yes.
But it's
it
nice. It
can be, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I think when you know each other really well, and when you do have, we were just saying, if there's a sort of director status and a composer status, the director always has the last word. Yeah.
Sometimes why do you don't like my music? Sorry,
and
that's
hard. Yeah, exactly. I think when you're looking at the person that you love and you're saying that you don't like their work, it's intense. I can imagine.
Did you work for the first play of Fleabag?
Yes, yeah.
And how the music changed between the play and the series?
There wasn't that much music in the play. It was. We decided to go with sort of muzak, like really sort of like lots of kind of schmoozy saxophone for some reason. This is the sort of rule, is that we always, and I think this is sort of the way I work anyway, is to try and play against what we're sort of experiencing on the picture. So for the play, it didn't feel, tonally Fleabag's so interesting, and it just didn't feel right to do something kind of comic. So always the sort of place that we would go to is irony. And then we found, this sort of slightly kind of office-y, elevator-y sort of atmosphere. There's not that much music in the play, actually. There's also quite a lot of sound effects, so I ended up kind of scoring it, because it's a one-woman show. All the voices that we then sort of meet in the series, they were all just voiceovers, and so it was scoring it in a kind of slightly different way.
And how the creative processes for the series? Did you speak a lot before the edit, before the shooting, or do you react with the edit?
I think, well, usually I'm sort of on board really early, and again, like a total privilege, sort of knowing the creator so well. So we never really actually weirdly talked directly about it. We just sort of, I don't know, our sense of humours are so sort of entangled in a great way that we sort of knew that we were talking about it without actually having to talk about it. And so the process of Fleabag was slightly different. But usually, and what was similar, I suppose, is that I start with the scripts and start sort of having ideas and maybe send through some sketches. And then when they start doing the assemblies, then I might start loosely kind of scoring those. But because you then have the lock afterwards, you don't want to start being really nuanced and precise, especially with comedy like this, I think, where every eye movement and every gesture has meaning. There's not a beat that's missed. And the music really needed to support that. But you could really, even in the scripts, you could really hear where the silence needed to be. So you start to, so again, that's why it's important to go from the scripts as well, because I think rhythm is really important. And especially, I think with comedy, it's more complex sometimes, I think, to find that, because you never want to score the comedy. You sort of want to always score the drama, weirdly, I think. If you score the comedy on top of a comedy, it doesn't, exactly.
And the point in Fleabag, it's only contrast. You never have music to support the emotion or situation. It's always a counterpoint in the world.
Yeah, exactly, to counterpoint completely.
And it's brilliant, because it's like if the music was inconscious of a character, not like what she says or what we can see. It's another thing. And do you work with a narrative? It's narrative or it's rhythm for you? It's or both of them.
It's completely both. But I think you're absolutely right, because you can't. If you score surface things, it's not. You lose. I think you lose the integrity of what's happening to the person or in the scene. So you have to score it always has to be a sort of like an internal thing that you're seeking to kind of expose, but not wildly or in a huge way. The music can be big in scale, but you have to be very careful not to be saying the same things that obviously, I mean, this is all, we know this so well, but to be saying the same things that you're in the music that you're seeing on the picture or hearing in the dialogue, it just doesn't, that kind of layering never works, does it?
Never. It's like a dialogue. And when the choice to cut the music, like sometimes it's very violent, and I like that.
Yeah.
It's like when you cut a dialogue. Is it something you were thinking before the shooting, or is it
sort of? Well, actually, the way Phoebe writes is that everything is really, really everything is scripted. So, and Gary Dolner, our editor, is a genius, and so he did add some of the cuts, and we worked actually. I mean, editors and composers work so closely together. Editors are sort of essential to composers, really, and that relationship's really important. And he did make some really brilliant choices about where to cut. Most of them were already in the script. But actually, weirdly, having said that, most of the, because a lot of the dialogue is sort of spliced, in the middle of saying a word, we cut away. And it is aggressive, it is violent, and it's meant to be. It's sort of, you're meant to kind of feel slightly thrown around by it.
After the silence, after music, contrast, and the cut is another way to hear the silence.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a kind of narration too, and we feel that in
totally.
In
like silence is as much a part of a score, and you can't. I think the thing is about cutting away. It's about not giving it all to the audience. It's too easy. It's sort of like finish it nicely. I think especially when a character is sort of really finding her way like that it is crunchy what she's experiencing, and our minds don't really work like that. We don't resolve things every time. We do flit around, and
she never resolves things.
No, until the end though. I feel like she does a bit until the end. Yeah. I think
we don't spoil. And can you? I don't know if you have some clip with the Fleabag.
Oh yeah.
But I really want to hear you about the chorus in the season 2. because there is this story with the priest, and you compose a music, a church music with some young boys' voices. How do you work, and how do you find this idea?
It was. It did take us a while, I have to say. Like, to be completely truthful about it, it wasn't a kind of I know exactly what to do immediately thing. Not at all. Because tonally, again, the second series is so interesting in that you never really know which way it's going, and I don't think the temperature of it was always changing, and to score it was sort of conventional, just like a show, or just like with conventional instruments, just didn't really feel right. But mainly the thing that first episode when they were all sitting around the table, there was something that felt quite sort of Greek about it, and just very kind of immediately we're off. You know, there's no sort of like easing in, and the themes that we're exploring straight away are huge. It's like family and betrayal and redemption and religion, really, in that first episode, and so. It felt that when I said, do you think maybe we could explore looking at some choral music and things, there was a sort of it wasn't resisted, but it was like this feels like an unusual approach. And then what was interesting to me, I thought, is that what I did, we decided on this sort of Kyrie, the Lord have mercy lyrics, and to have them sung by adults. So I recorded a whole bunch of music sung by 6 grown-ups, and we put it on the first episode, and it immediately felt really wrong, which was terrible. That was actually when you're working with your sister and you sort of have a really brilliant idea, and then you know it's right, and for some reason it's wrong, and it's sort of, that was quite interesting. And then it became really clear really immediately that to have mature voices right at the beginning of the second series, after what we've sort of experienced with her, just felt way too much. There needed to be a naivety, I think, in the sound, and in the sort of, if the music was going to be so present, it couldn't jump her journey. So I then went and recorded it with young boys, and then put that on episode 1, and it immediately worked, and that was great. And it was so strange and fortunate that it worked. But then what was nice is that it turned out that as she develops, as the character develops, so do the voices. And so we start as kids, really, and then we end as adults, and that felt like a good journey.
It's a mix of adults and young boys at the end, or only adults?
No, mainly only adults at the end.
Yeah.
But throughout, you do every sort of time we have a sort of a family thing. We do get the boys again, so it's that, and that sort of is a reflection on those. You know, it's like a nostalgia in childhood, and it's also slightly scrappier. It's not as polished. But then, for instance, when the father character walks down the aisle, there was a sort of there's a sort of resolution in it, and that felt so that I just had the male singers there, and they're singing. Also with him, he never quite can finish a sentence, and so the singers never quite complete their words, but they're sort of singing with each other, so we feel like they're singing a complete lyric, but they're not quite doing. And then as he reaches the priest, it sort of then becomes a bit more formed. So each one sort of, because there's not that much music in it really, but each time we were we were so specific, like painfully specific, with what it meant and what it should rhythmically do, and I hope that paid off.
Maybe we can see.
Should we? Yeah. Should we have a look? I think we got some episode 1. That was like I think when we meet the priest, and we sort of, when he gives her his number, essentially, you feel it sort of starting to evolve there a bit more, I hope, with the grown-ups' voices.
She's becoming an adult
She's becoming an adult. Yeah, exactly. And she's also she's having to face. She's about to sort of have. She's going to have to face her fears about love and relationships with this person that she's just met, and the big female voices, I suppose, the big soprano. It just needed to be epic on that scale because these things are huge. These all of these kind of really shared human emotions and our instincts. So I feel, it just felt really right to go big.
She's becoming an adult, but she can't love the priest. It's like a big tragedy, and it's a music for tragedy.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. It's like, I think I don't know. It's partly really the way I feel about comedy, but I feel like that there is probably more tragedy in comedy than comedy.
Of course.
That feels like a much more appealing approach musically. Scoring. Yeah, it gives me the shivers. Scoring comedy with comedy.
The first question was, if you do comedy with a comedy, it's twice the same thing. It's not interesting.
Yeah, it's not interesting at all. It's really boring, and it sort of. I think it can make people really. It just makes you angry because it's patronising as well, and also it's just not interesting because, we're intelligent animals and we're all emotional, and so you slightly feel like you're being lied to. I think if you're not being delivered the subtext,
of course,
with the music.
And you work with your feature film. The name is Virginia.
Vita in Virginia.
And you work with the same processes with this director?
Yeah, it was. It's sort of my process. I really sort of. The more I talk about it, the more I realise that there is a pattern, and that's very reassuring. But I was on quite early. She hadn't finished writing the script then, and we just had lots of meetings about what the nature, because it's about the love affair between Virginia Woolf and Vita Sackville-West, and it's told through the love letters that they wrote to each other, and. We talked a lot about what it meant for these two women to commit to loving each other in a time where it was completely forbidden. And they were, in their work, really transgressive, both of them, and also in their kind of like domestic lives. They were both married, but they both, within their respective relationships, made their own rules up with how they wanted to conduct their lives, and which didn't fit within society at all. And then it was sort of how they kind of came to accept that, and particularly Vita Sackville-West, I think, was a lot more liberal about that, and her husband was more. He sort of embraced it a bit more. And he also was gay, so they were having a sort of into a great time. Yeah, it was all very good. But Virginia Woolf obviously had a much more troubled time with it, I think. So, because also there've been so many that story, not specifically these letters, but we know a lot about Virginia Woolf. But actually, really, the most famous thing I think we know about Virginia Woolf is how she died, rather than sort of how she lived, in a way. So it was exciting to be able to tell that. And then what we didn't want to do was tell a kind of soft, focused, kind of beautiful, which you could easily do with that. It's a very, very romantic story. But because they were fiercely independent, brilliantly intelligent, and like pioneers, really, these women, in their work and sort of in their lives, we really felt that we needed to reflect that in the work. And Chania Button, the director, asked me to really go sort of head in that direction with the music, and the music should carry most of the weight of that. And so we did go like very, very modern, and which is
modernity to be free like this.
Yeah, absolutely, and it really felt good. It was really scary because I totally knew that there was going to be a lot of people that would upset people because it's Virginia Woolf, and they're sort of. It's interesting. There seems to people want people's. this is a huge generalization, but I think people feel kind of safe in the stories that they've been, if they can imagine her sort of in the period and in the tragedy. This feels very dangerous. Then it's sort of a more comfortable place to be, and so that would mean like lots of piano music over it, and sort of like telling it like packaging it in a way that is safe and comfortable, but packaging it in the way that we did. It's not safe or comfortable at all.
It's not piano.
No, it's
violin.
No, that was the one thing that Chania said. She was like, "We're definitely not allowed a piano."
It's electro.
And and it's electronic, and again and voices. And the voice was interesting, and we'll show a clip in a minute. But it was the first thing that I sent her, and I was like, "With this vibe, like, is this going to work?" And what I did was take a female vocal and drop the octave of it and sort of manipulate it and sort of slightly distort it. So there is an androgyny to sort of neutralise it in a way. We didn't really want anything kind of particularly feminine or masculine, really. We just sort of slightly really wanted to try and convey the spirit of their relationship. And so I sort of found this voice which sort of felt quite interesting, and then this sort of more electronic sort of approach, which thankfully people have really understood. Which I was like very nervous about this, but they've really understood what the intentions were behind it.
And there is lots of music in this movie.
Yeah, there is a lot.
We hear the music, so a lot.
Yeah. There is a lot of music, and it. But again, I'm really sensitive to too much music. It's my like real pet hate is when there's loads and loads and loads of music, because you just feel like you're covering stuff up. It needs to be so deliberate, and so I tend to do the thing, I suppose, where you just write all the music, and then I tend to just be like taking it out all the time, and then you tend to be left with.
Yeah, when you can hear music, it's a real event.
Yeah, exactly. You were saying this yesterday. Exactly. You want it to be every time you hear it, for it to have meaning, and because music will enhance a moment, and if it's just like enhancing all the moments, it sort of loses its thing. And so
You can see.
Should we have a
little?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I think I chose that scene because the obvious way I think to score that is to be much softer and to sort of be a little, like, basically not too rhythmic. But actually what she's saying is that she's not an invalid, and that she's strong, and that she loves her, and that she misses her. Which and there are huge stakes in that, and there's and risk, and it's really brave. So it never felt right to be. It always felt like there needed to be this kind of forward motion, really, rather than a sort of static kind of let's just allow for this kind of these beautiful moments, which just didn't feel honest.
There is a rhythm with the dialogues too, like a voice in the music.
Yeah.
You feel, and do the directors, this one or your sister, work with music on the shooting? Do they need to have a music in the?
Actually, with this, both. Well, with this one, I have made playlists of music, of sort of music that I've felt like maybe they would be listening to now, and actually also with Phoebe, we had done some. It's slightly different though. She was sort of making playlists, weirdly, actually, on that.
It's a playlist with your song or
no,
some
just like
reference
tracks. Yeah, exactly. Because that's sort of just a sort of atmosphere, and sometimes they don't really mean that much. It's just something about tempo and the temperature of the music, whether it's kind of happy or sad or literally like like hot or cold, or sexy or not sexy. But what I really do try and always do is work without a temp score, because where they can be quite useful, particularly when you're working to a really, really tight deadline. You know, it can be you just need that kind of guidance. And a temp score director will know exactly what they want, exactly what the rhythm of that should be, and the tone of it should be. So they find a piece of music and they put it on the scene and they say, "Can you copy it?"
It can be a way to be together with the DOP and the actor. I work like that.
Oh yeah, so
I have music in my here and the DOP too.
Yeah,
and so we can move with music the same together.
Yeah,
and with the actor who was in a.
Oh, that's
in
that's really good.
Sometimes, not every.
Because that's also because I think. Do you ever? Will a composer ever give you music to do that? Like it's like. Score,
no, it's not a definitive score.
Yeah,
but it's some songs I want to put in the Série.
Yeah,
but I don't know if I can buy it this step. But I hope so.
Yeah,
I feel it's this one. I want this one, and we can move and we can hear this rhythm, this mood together to feel the same mood. And
that is the thing that
when it's possible, it's very nice. And if you have to change after because you don't have enough money to buy this song, there is some accident, a good accident, you know, and it can work with another song too.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think it's a really good way of getting everyone to sort of just within each other's rhythm, isn't it? Just because then actually once you watch the picture back and you realise everyone's been moving, it's the most important thing is that everyone's sort of singing the same, dancing together, dancing the same dance, and using music while you're shooting is a really good way of doing that. I've never been asked to produce music for that, but it's something that I would really like to do, like really write like early on, just some things, and then. I mean, even though I understand that's not what you were doing, they were just tunes. But to do that, because I think basically the earlier that you can start collaborating, the better, because you can then, and everyone, and also everyone sort of slightly feels like the distance between the DOP and the composer is huge. And the closer that you can bring those things together, I think the quality of the thing just feels, a bit more sort of intertwined and good.
Yeah, because. It's music for me. It's like a dialogue, like a character.
Yeah.
So it has to be on the screenplay.
Yeah.
And on the shooting. With
it's like a voice. It has to be really ever present.
It's not possible each time, but I think it's a good way to collaborate and to create to get together.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like wherever I get the opportunity when they're shooting, I'll just go. And sort of just to sort of hang out, really, just to sort of like make yourself, because you want to feel part of it. It's sort of, I do and have done lots more theatre really than anything else, and it's that sort of nature of being in the room and just being around other people's energies that really starts to produce kind of ideas, I think. And the more that you can do that, because it's such a solitary job, and usually with TV and film, you're in post-production and you're there and you're on the phone, which is all good and I like it. But I think to have the hit of the other brains. And in person, I think. And also when it's earlier, it's slightly more casual. It's not, you really don't feel the clock in the same way that you do when you're approaching the lock and things. So, being present.
Yeah. And what were your influence when you were young? What did you hear? What voices did you hear?
No, but I was really classical when I was young, like a proper. I did. I sort of really discovered it at school, and started playing the piano and realised that I really liked the discipline of it so much, like all the practicing and because there's such a reward in when you're learning a musical instrument. Because you do just get better, and then you can perform it, and the reward in that is huge. It's really demonstrated, and you can demonstrate it to other people, which is a lovely thing. And then, so I was sort of writing bits and pieces of music, but nothing really for picture, almost like little poems. And then I went to go and study music at university, but was writing really atonal kind of. I used to call it squeaky gate music. Like I wrote a piece for a trombone and a light switch, and I was like going through a really experimental phase, which I actually feel like it was a rite of passage, and think about that piece quite a lot. And I feel like it was an important thing to do, because it was sort of exploring, which is also something that I'm really interested in. It's like when music doesn't always have to be music. Does that make any sense? Not really. No, 100% doesn't make any sense.
I like this sentence.
Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't. And so when you're, because it's so ephemeral and it's like it's an abstract thing, the more I think you can plug into that, because feelings are really abstract, and it interests me. It's wonderful to hear a beautiful, a cello play something really beautiful. But it interests me to be able to find that same beauty and that same effect through a sort of through something that isn't as conventional or easily won, because we all really want to hear the cello, definitely all the time, and we need to hear the cello sometimes. It's like a necessity. But if you're in the mood, or if the right, and if it's in a film score and the right thing is being sort of played against the right thing. But sometimes I think you slightly want to ambush your listener. Ambush, like...
I need the translation.
We need the thing. It's like, I wish I could... A bit?
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
It's a track...
sort of like
a piège in French. A truck. Yeah.
A truck.
Embuscade. Merci.
Does that make sense? Does that make sense as a sentence though? Is it like
I didn't know this word.
Yeah. No, I think to do that sometimes it can be good. It's really, you don't want to do that all the time though, because it gets kind of, sometimes you just really need something to hang on to in the score. But the trombone and the light switch made me think that you can be effective and it can be musical and it doesn't need to be musical. It's a layered and complicated thing sometimes. We get through it. Oh, I'm sorry. We can swap. Do you want to speak in French and I can? Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to do that?
No,
do you though?
You speak in French.
No, I speak terrible French. It's terrible. But I can put this on. I don't mind. But we can also listen to another clip.
No, I don't speak French. I continue.
Okay, amazing.
I manage. And when did you choose to be a musician?
It sort of it wasn't. I really think I wanted to. It wasn't one of those things that just sort of happened. I mean, I think when I found it when I was young, it kind of really. Thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. I found it when I was young, and then I just went for it and really wanted to be there. And then when I was older and at university, again the discipline of writing music and learning about it, and I don't know, it just really made sense to me. Just music always really made sense to me. And then when I started thinking about scoring to picture, that was really exciting, because when you start to then be able to respond to the picture in terms of what the character is feeling, but really to respond to the writer, and those kinds of collaborations. It's all storytelling, and when I was growing up, we were taken to the theatre loads, and there was lots of cinema around, and we were really that was all really embraced. And so when I really loved music so much and was practicing and spending sort of 10 hours a day just wanting to become really good at, like, say, playing the piano, and then realizing that I could translate that into storytelling, that was when I sort of fell in love with it again. And then it does keep surprising me. I'm asked to do this. It's quite a variety of things that I'm asked to do, but all of them around telling some sort of expression, basically, whether it's in songwriting or scoring, and actually, I'm just about to do some solo stuff, and that weirdly is the thing that I'm most scared of, because there's no picture and no script, and I have to kind of access, the other thing, the sort of slightly more personal thing, and that feels like quite far away, and will be a challenge, definitely.
It's an album or to play in live?
It'll be an album, and I think there will be some live performances of it, and I think it will probably take me about a year to do. I think they're going to give me. What I mean is they're going to give me a year to do it, and I have to do it in a year, basically. And the live stuff I really enjoy as well, because the one thing that you don't get so much when you're working with picture is I don't get that relationship with the audience. Yeah, exactly. You really don't. So when you're performing it live and you really have that live sense of communication, that feels very special.
You can sing too?
Not really. No, I mean I can sing, but like. I wouldn't. I'm not a sort of confident singer. I can sort of, So I'm not Beyonce.
No?
I mean, I know I look like Beyonce. No, I'm not Beyonce.
But you will play alone and no voice, only.
There might be a bit of voice. Again, it's like it's a sort of new. The challenge of it is to do a bit of singing, but just a sort of. I don't really know what it is yet. I'm sort of going to let it, just sort of arrive
free, when in progress.
Okay. Exactly, which feels.
And could you compose for someone else, for a singer, so for?
Yeah, no, I've just done that. I've just been writing some songs with a singer, and that was absolutely wonderful, because I've not done that much co-writing before, and my whole soul just started to it really felt. I don't know, when you work alone so much, I think it has to, for me anyway, I've made it into a really strong and safe environment, and I really like it, and I have to love going to the studio, even when I really don't want to be there. And I tend to, my relationship with it is sort of quite complicated, because, so I'll tend to have to be there kind of in the morning, but I'll sort of like walk around the I won't want to actually start. I'm like side-eyeing the studio basically, and then by about kind of 4 p.m. I'm kind of ready. I've made friends with it again, and when sit down. But then it means that you then are going to write for kind of 7 or 8 hours. So the days are long in that way, but you sort of do what you've got to do to sort of make it work and make it a nice place to be. But then when I was co-writing with this singer, there is a particular kind of flavour to co-writing that is really, really wonderful. And it's partly that you're not doing it alone, that you're sort of supporting each other, which also is really intense. Like definitely, it wasn't all joyful. Like there was some really, there were moments where we got sort of a bit like
conflict and
loads of conflict. Yeah. Which was also really exciting because, but we knew we sort of had to get through it and get to the goods. And there were some days that it just really wasn't working. Like we just everything, there was a piano in the room. She has a fantastic voice, and I would tend to just sort of sit down and start noodling, and then she would be singing, and maybe it would work, maybe it wouldn't, and then we go on a long walk. And most of the time, actually, the songs, because we spent a lot of time chatting and getting to know each other, that the songs actually didn't take the good songs anyway, didn't take very long to write, which is so often the case, I think.
It's like a screenwriter. It's like a writing room when you are not alone, when you have co-writer. Yeah. It's like music.
Yeah,
really,
totally.
Because we do ping pong, one says something and another is no, it's not good, and propose something else, and at that time you can play music together.
Oh, definitely,
definitely. And
it's wonderful.
It's wonderful. And when you are alone, you need to create alone, to be alone with your page, and to have one vision, because a screenplay, it's just one vision, but after we need to be together and to play music together.
Yeah,
it's really
it's exactly the same,
yeah.
totally. Because also I feel like you're sort of, there is a sense you're supporting each other in that, and I think you up your game or something. Well, not up your game, but you can sort of gauge the. I've never written with more than one person, so I'd be really interested if there were, in a music way, to do the sort of writer's room thing, and when there are sort of 5 or 6, or
you are
people.
more brains. When you have 5 writers, you have 5 brains. It's better than one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
And then if it's interesting, the projects that you need to do, some of the things you need to do, you just have to do them on your own. It's a really interesting thing, but I do think it's healthy. Ideally for me, I'd have a balance of doing co-writing things and then stuff that I would just sort of do on my own, because I do find the privacy of it, once you get through the kind of hell of like 10 a.m. to 4, you just like don't want to be there at all, and then you sort of like slightly have a conversation with it and say like, I'm here, I have to be here, we're in this together. And a lot of this is out loud in the studio that I'm saying as well. It's like, maybe that is also the thing. Maybe it is that you create another person or something you need to create you create voices in the room or something, not crazy voices that I'm talking about, but yeah, I think some of the privacy of it and the intimacy of it when you're writing is really precious.
Yeah,
and
sure.
It's really interesting, actually. I have such a weird relationship when people come into my studio. There are some people that just like, I can't, because you have to, it's a precious energy. The minute, they've sort of either like producers or someone has come in and it's just felt like I need to keep the door open for like 2 days afterwards.
It's your
exactly.
room.
You have to like waft it out again.
I want to keep my energy.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And when you compose for theatre, you can't play on live, or
sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you like it.
Yeah. Live is always really wonderful. It's the sort of best bit of I think any kind of scoring process is when you get the musicians in, because you can do, you can have the ideas and you can you can implement them as precisely as you can, depending on how well you know whether you can like notate music or read music. But I think once you get a musician in, the collaboration what they then bring to that's the really wonderful moment, because a really wonderful player, I guess it must be like actors, and when an actor starts speaking some dialogue that you've written, when a musician starts bringing their personality to some music that you've written, and they start finding things that you didn't necessarily know was,
it's a
they were
wonderful
there.
moment.
Yeah, it really is, and that's when it feels like your lungs feel full, and
your
it's
soul
good.
is
Yeah.
And when you're on the studio to record chorus or lots of instruments, are you the chef d'orchestre?
No, the conductor. No, I don't really like doing that, really, because I get too like excited by if I'm with the musicians. I sort of I think I get too distracted, so I need to be in the control room looking at the picture, and because sometimes sometimes also you want to make changes. I make a lot of changes in recording sessions as well, which people seem to sort of I don't know, I think it's like completely normal to do that, because as soon as you start hearing the musicians playing it, that sparks like 100 more ideas, but my like overtime bills are
you need to have a distance.
But it is but I think the whole making work and making art is just always about responding, I think, the whole time. And so when it's either if you're writing music to picture, or if you're if a musician is playing your work, you sort of want to keep the space open to be able to keep playing. When it starts to feel, you can instantly feel it, I think, in any of the areas when they start to feel slightly more constricted. It feels tight, and then no one it's just about being. There's a freedom in it that you need always.
It's like to direct and play in the same time. It's very difficult because you don't have this distance. To
you
see
definitely
and
need the distance to
feel. I don't know how actors can do
direct
both of them
and then do both of them at the same time. I know I don't really understand that either because you think
they do well, but I think it's very difficult.
I think it is hard, and but some composers are really brilliant at it actually, and it's a sort of different kind of control. I think it's just the way it's really the way you hear things. But my focus is just I'm so sort of, I need to be so precise because also time is money in recording studios and it just gets really expensive really quickly. And also I know that I'm always going to go over. So I need to be really efficient with the changes. And I know that there are going to be at least sort of 10, which can get musicians. I tend to now use the same musicians. Yeah. Because they are very generous and they know what's coming and they will like have their pencils at the ready and I'm grateful for that because I'm sure that could be a very frustrating thing to keep changing things. But I also think that's the sort of you tend to change things because the person that you're working with is brilliant and you want more of them. Yeah. So
it's nice, good collaborating. And do you want to show us something?
Yeah. I tell you what, actually, let's. We could look at. There's a one called ABC.
This is Série. It's another Série.
Yeah. So this is. I wanted to. I thought of that one because I realised when I was putting together these clips that that I guess what I find quite interesting is never quite doing. Because I've been doing quite a lot of period things like Vita and Virginia, and this was the ABC Murders, which is an Agatha Christie series with John Malkovich as Poirot, which is out on Amazon. But that scene, I didn't really do a very period score necessarily, but because that scene there, we don't know at that point who's the killer, the girl or the girl or the guy, and so it's sort of Sex and Status, and it just it feels to have a sort of flamenco guitar isn't necessarily what you said. I said not what you'd necessarily expect, but because the feeling of it is so right, you sort of allow it, and it sort of just naturally, I think anyway, becomes kind of part of the tapestry of what's going on. And I think I find that a good way to approach music in general. It doesn't always need to be the obvious like instrument or it's sort of the trombone and the light switch slightly again, is that you can if you can create the right feeling, it can be sort of through. And sort of. I mean, you have to be careful, I think, sometimes not to kind of completely alienate people. But I quite liked that one for that reason, because it's sort of, it needed to feel slightly threatening, and flamenco.
Yeah, there is a frightening mood.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than a piano. Yeah, rather than essentially a piano because it's period.
But like something détourné, not real frightening, like revisited.
Revisited.
Yeah.
Yes.
With flamenco, it's a mix.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and. What have you a series or movie you can say I love this way to create music and images together?
Do you mean
in cinema or series?
Like a favorite,
like
a favorite film? Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I tend to kind of weirdly, the things that I like don't really have that much music in them. Except for obviously things that I really love are like The English Patient or something like that, which is kind of completely beautiful, and every part of that film is just really, you really feel like it's all working together, and the score is Completely wonderful.
I know it's.
Oh yeah, Gabriel Yared.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
Gabriel
Oh,
Yared.
cool. Yeah, you already wrote him down. Yeah, he's
because
wonderful.
I love this compositor.
Yeah, he's completely brilliant.
He did lots of French movies too.
Yeah, yeah. No, he's wonderful. And yeah, I think. But then also things like I've been. Things that are sort of slightly, but I don't know. Like the Coen brothers use music so brilliantly, but they do like Carter Burwell.
But the English version is music with support the story and the images. It's not by contrast.
No, interestingly, yeah. Well, no, it's not actually. You're right, because it does. Yeah, see, this is maybe I've just been getting it wrong.
So you like something you don't want to do.
Exactly. You just have to give them what they want. Yeah. Because it does feel really, and it's, damn.
You have to kill your father.
I'm like really
to create.
about this, But I think, because when the plane, when they're up in the sky and it's really beautiful music, you want to be in that space, and it's really wonderful. And yeah. Damn, I'm gonna. It's really genuinely made me think, about some things. Maybe the trombone and the light switch needs to be like over there, and the English Patient, more of that. But then I don't know. I watched The Favourite, and the score in that I think is really interesting because there's not really much music in that. But there's a sort of, you've really got to respond. I'm going to get myself out of this hole because you've just got to really respond to the work that you're asked to. So I think with something like The English Patient, I would hope that I would just go with the airplane and do the, and rather than do something, when you need to be contrasting, and when you need to, go with it a little bit more and. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And how do you feel? What? I think I will ask in French because it's a complete.
It's my turn.
Qu'est-ce qui fait qu'une musique reste?
What makes music timeless and last throughout years, periods, history?
Very, very.
Yes, it's like revenge. You're getting
a piège.
What makes music timeless? I think it's because it's abstract, and I think it's because because we're animals, and it speaks to our animal, it speaks to our nature, and our that's why. And feelings are timeless. You can go. You look back at in books that that were written, I don't know, decades and decades ago, and we can relate to those, to the feelings of those characters. And I think music occupies a similar space, and so I think because music can make us feel afraid, or it can make us feel, romantic. Those senses are timeless, and they kind of live in us as in our kind of animal ways, and so I think music does a similar thing.
So the big question: can the music change humanity?
Yes. No, I mean, I think it can change. I think people are always going to do what they want to do. Hang on a minute. What's happening? I'm talking really, really quickly, just trying to get an answer out. I think human beings are always going to do what they want to do, but I think that music can influence, and it can soften, and I think people use it. People, when people meditate, to to sort of to sort of try and get to a place that they need to get to within themselves, so that they can have their day, or do their politics, or have their relationship, and I think music can be used. It can, but also people use it, and it can be used in ways to kind of manipulate people. So and for in bad ways as well. With I don't know, like, but I think it can. You know, you have, war songs and things like that, and you think of religion and the amount of music that's, and why we have music in there, and I think it is with a view to either bringing people together to make a change. Loads of lyrics are all about that, you know, in pop music as well.
I completely agree. I
Great,
think music can give us another way to be together, try to live together.
Yeah,
yeah,
it can bring us together.
It's a good way to finish, no?
Yeah, it's a lovely way to finish.
But I don't know if you have questions or. Yes. You can speak very loud.
Hello, I can hear you. Yeah.
No insult to the person that
No, of course.
just in your own way, and if you could put your own spin on it.
My own spin on it. Well, I think. Oh gosh, that's such a good question. And all I can think about is the English patient, because it's like that's literally. And so obviously that would be wonderful because of the scale of that, and that would be, I think. Yeah, anything that's weirdly. I tell you what, I would love to do is rescore Twin Peaks, because that's just so strange, and I would really like to know. I'd be interested to respond to that and to bring something new to that. But I mean, the original score for that is absolutely. That's another actually really good example of something that just is amazing and really works.
Twin Peaks. A good challenge.
Yeah, definitely a challenge, yeah.
Yes?
Do you create your own songs in electronics, or you pick up?
My own sounds. I have really started to do that more recently, because I think sample libraries are brilliant, and they're a very efficient way of working. But I think because they're the really popular ones, everyone sort of tends to start using the same things. And so recently, I just did an episode of Black Mirror, and for that I asked a guy to create basically new sounds and a new kind of library for me, just to sort of get I think more of a unique. But I mean, and it was great. He went to a junkyard basically and came back with all sorts of different things and started making new sounds. So I think I'm heading in that direction. That was really, really successful in terms of just like having a bin of things that I know that are only for me. I like that.
En français, je peux répéter fort.
When do you choose when you will have music or silence on stage, or whether you put music or not to an image? Is it before, scene by scene? I mean, when do you actually choose whether there should be music or not at certain parts?
I think that I think when I'm watching it, because I think if it's for picture, it will. You really know. I think you really do immediately have a sense of where the music should be, and where there shouldn't be any. And so I particularly if there's loads and loads of dialogue, for instance, I know immediately that I'm going to be approaching that with less music, So I think it really is when I kind of experience the thing that I'm collaborating with, that's when I'll know how much silence there should be. And I'm always kind of looking for always looking for the silence more than I'm looking for the music. Does that answer your question? Okay, good.
And did you have another thing to show? Or it's finished? The clips.
I do, but I think we will.
Okay. So.
In the first clip that we saw from Fleabag, and maybe in the second as well, when the choir is there and the characters speak, I had the feeling that the dialogues were on the beat like a flow. Is this something that you worked on, or is this just that the way the choir is beating makes us perceive this like that?
This is really interesting because it happened. It was like both ways in when I was scoring Fleabag. The first episode, we were so precise with it. It really, with every eye movement, every beat, was scored. But then what was interesting is that with the which was this like sort of weird alchemy, I think, of when you've just been like hanging out essentially with your kind of creative team. And it's the sort of thing that you were talking about how everyone being in the sort of same rhythm. That when I had pre-written the adults singing, kind of before we started putting anything to picture, weirdly, and they'd locked the picture by then, the rhythm of the adult choir just happened to really completely match the edit. It was so weird. It was so weird and so great that we all really felt like we genuinely understood what the sort of animal of it was, and so that was really bizarre. But that's really never happened to me before, and it's much more often that I would do the scoring, because the satisfaction you get from it, when an eye look comes with something. But there's a really big like taste game with that. Like the taste police can like be on you a lot, I think, if you start to kind of overuse that sort of thing. So but that's really interesting that, I mean, in both cases it happened with Fleabag.
It's very brilliant and effective because it makes you feel like you're out of the reality in the mind of the character. And then suddenly the music stops and people start talking and interacting like you're rushed in your real life again. So pretty effective and pretty brilliant.
Brilliant. I'm so glad, because that is completely that was the intention, especially. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that, because we spent there was a lot of there was a lot of care and love poured into all of that. So it's very nice to hear. Thank you. I think there is something sort of spiritual about it, because I think you definitely. So I do the thing where I kind of like don't want to be in the studio for the first kind of like half of the day, but I kind of force myself to be there, and then. So I've done all the kind of like pre-stuff of like reading the scripts and maybe looking at the picture, and when I really have to sit down and just like focus, and start writing, it's a weird. You do go in, or I do find that I go into a sort of trance state. Like most of the things, weirdly, I sort of can't. You sort of don't really remember doing them. If that makes any sense. But you sort of, once you're on a roll, and then sort of 6 or 7 hours do kind of start going. They go by, and you kind of come out the other end, and you're changed, and you've written it. And you kind of really, the scary thing is because it has been a sort of trance, and you're sort of occupying this, you're conscious, you are completely conscious, but your subconscious is like really, really working hard as well, which is why I think you go into this kind of suspended sort of state. And then because your subconscious is working equally, if not more hard than your consciousness. The scary thing is when you have finished it and then you go and have a cup of tea or something, or maybe go to sleep, and you wake up and then you have to re-listen to what it is. And I find that the most painful thing, because there definitely have been times when I've been like, what was I like? That was like not a good idea at all, or it hasn't worked, and I sort of got carried away. But sometimes, and usually it's sort of, I sort of have to listen with my eyes closed, and it's okay. But I think that tends to be that bit of the actual kind of the practical sort of sitting down and writing. But then I also tend to kind of get musicians in really early to sort of start experimenting, and to start workshopping ideas really early on. Because again, I think the earlier you start kind of experimenting, you have way more space and time, and then the goods, you don't feel you feel a bit less self-conscious. I think less time, less pressure, but I do. It's weird. I do all of that, and then I know this is sort of the case for quite a lot of creative people, but I definitely need the deadline. I think no deadline, and it's just like I'd just never do anything like it. But I think, and I do tend to, the closer the deadline gets, the sort of more excited I get or something. And so the work tends to kind of like, it's sort of, I'm kind of doing quite casual, kind of nice stuff. Like if it was a graph, it would be like nice sort of like round edges for like and then like it would just be like a vertical thing to kind of try and finish it, I think. So, yeah.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you so
was
much.
so nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
Processes. Thank you very much.
You.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
Really.